very good morning to our honorable speaker, Dr. P. Lakshmi ma'am. It's a privilege that you are here today and you could make out time from your busy schedule for our student. Before we proceed further, I would like to introduce you to our students. So Dr. P. Lakshmi ma'am, she is not only a passionate teacher with decades of experience in industry, academics and administration. She started her teaching career at Hidayatullah National Law University, Raipur, and continued her service with ITM University, SGT University, Gurgaon. She also headed the law school of Ansal University and GD Goenka University, Gurgaon, before joining the Adani Institute of Infrastructure as professor and head of PGDM law, and she's presently also the chair of PGDM. She's been honored for her teaching and research skills at preferable and different levels by actively participating in training programs conducted by experts from Cardiff Law School, University of New Hampshire School of Law, and National University of Singapore and the Indian Ministry of Human Resource Development. Apart from that, ma'am has also experienced her views and also expressed her thoughts in various journals and paper presentations and various other places. So ma'am, it is really an honor that you are going to be sharing your knowledge of such a vivid knowledge that you have gained over the years to our students on a very important topic, which is really and very recently happened, that is legal liability discussion on Bhopal and Vizag. Ma'am, the floor is all yours.
So good morning, everyone. I think I'm audible to everyone. I'm clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah. So my sincere thanks to School of Law, Chettinad Academy of Research and Education for giving me this opportunity. Special thanks to Mrinalini for inviting me. My subject area of specialization is family law. But when Mrinalini invited me to talk on marriage, divorce, or any other topic related to the subject family law, I prefer to choose a topic which recently shook my conscience. When I was young, once I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is that pray to God to bless me with a good day. Then we start the routine work. But now the practice has changed. The first thing in the morning, what I do, like what are the messages, WhatsApp messages, what are the emails? This has become the routine now. Now we have forgotten about God. I think most of us do that. So on 7th May, as usual, I checked my mobile and I saw some shocking WhatsApp photos and videos. I could see men to my mobile early in the morning. What I saw was that in my mobile phone, shocking WhatsApp photos and videos. I could see men and women, children lying unconscious on the roads, many being rushed to the hospital. I think the first thing that I saw was this. So, my God, what is happening? Where is this happening? So, I started checking for that. So, yes. Okay, breaking news said that it is an industrial accident that has happened in Vizag. All the visuals I saw reminded me of the Bhopal gas leak tragedy, which happened nearly 35 years back. And I'm sure students who are listening to this were not born at that point of time. But in law of tort, I'm sure that you must have studied about this case while discussing about strict liability, absolute liability. I'm sure your faculty must have discussed about this case, Bhopal gas tragedy. And I felt that even after a major tragedy which happened 35 years back, we have not learnt our lesson, and hence I chose this topic, Bhopal to Visakhapatnam. And I am of the strong opinion that these are not accidents, because accident means which could not have been prevented. And why I say that these are not accidents, let us discuss today. So December 3rd, 1984, one of the world's worst industrial disaster happened in Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh. Highly toxic methyl isocyanate gas leaked from the Union Carbide factory, killing over 20,000 people and more than 5 lakh others. suffered agonizing injuries. The estimate about the death and the injured varies. Different institutions give different numbers, but approximately 20,000 people died and nearly 5 lakh people were injured. And to understand why this tragedy, gas tragedy, happened in the Union Carbide Corporation, we have to start from 1934. So in 1934, the American company Union Carbide Corporation, UCC, created an Indian subsidiary, Union Carbide India Limited, UCIL. And UCC owned 60% of the shares, thereby effectively controlling all actions taken by UCIL. So this is how it is starting. 1934 it happens. Union Carbide Corporation, it is creating an Indian subsidiary, UCIL, and having 60% shares in that. And this Union Carbide was supplying pesticides, raw material and chemicals for pharmaceuticals, paints, textiles, batteries, flashlights, products made from polyethylene to many countries, including India. And if you see here, this is the advertisement of UCC, which says that they are helping India in raising the living standards of the people by supplying these items. In 1950s, an agricultural boom began. In international level, 1950, an agricultural boom began, and the UCC wanted to reap the benefits by increased sale of pesticides. So for that, what they decided is that to build a factory in India. And in 1969, they leased land from state of Madhya Pradesh and created a factory in the city of Bhopal to manufacture a pesticide called Sevin. So it is created, this pesticide called Sevin, it is created by combining alpha-naphthol with methyl isocyanate, MIC. Production was started, or when the factory was opened, MIC was not produced in India. MIC was in Bhopal. This is how they started. Initially, the production of MIC was not happening in India. It was imported from USA. And then it was formulated here. The Sevin was formulated here. But then it was not very profitable for UCC because the cost of transport, everything was taking much of their profit. So they decided to manufacture MIC at Bhopal factory itself. Fine, they decided. Now what happens when they have decided to manufacture MIC in India and they wanted to have complete control over UCIL? What happens in 1974 is that India enacted the Foreign Equity Regulation Act, FERA. And what the act states is that foreign equity holdings in Indian companies cannot be more than 40%. Right? The FERA Act says that foreign equity holdings in Indian companies cannot be more than 40%. Now, UCC did not want to lose its control over UCIL. So they asked for exemption. And given to them, what is the reason given? They said MIC is an exclusive UCC technology inputs which is not available in India. So the exemption was granted by the Indian government and UCC was allowed to keep 50.9% of UCIL shares so that they can have a complete hold over their Indian subsidiary UCIL. So that's why I'm calling it as the deviation 1. Right? Next, what happens? This UCC, they had a similar MIC unit in America in West Virginia, which is already functioning and producing MIC. So what is expected is that the Bhopal unit, which was started later, it should have been a replica of that, whatever is already functioning, whatever they are already owning in West Virginia. But what they did was that they installed an inferior technology. The estimated cost of establishing the MIC plant in Bhopal was $28 million. But then it was brought down to $20 million. From $28 million to $20 million, how was that possible? They compromised on the safety requirements. So what was the compromise? Computerized leak detection system was not installed. Only minimum number of temperature indicators which can show sudden changes in temperatures were available. They often failed and they were replaced. 24 shutdown devices was the requirement, but only 8 were there. In Carbide's French plant, the safety devices were automatically controlled through computer systems with manual backup devices. But at Bhopal, they were all manual. Computerized system can predict possibility of leak based on weather conditions. It can predict based on the weather condition whether there is any risk of leak of the gas can be predicted by the computer system. It can sense leak. It can monitor the rate and concentration of the leak. And it was linked to telephone system which can automatically dial alerts. All these systems which were present in West Virginia and French plant were not there in India. That is how from $28 million, they brought it to $20 million, compromising on all the safety requirements. And in MIC plants in other countries, there was a clear emergency planning. It was there in place. A 30,000 gallon dump tank was kept empty, ready to receive any run of MIC. And there was also a sump system which had the capacity to hold 42,000 gallons of runoff. These things which were present in West Virginia or in French plant was not present here in India. These things were not present at all. Madhya Pradesh state government gave license to UCIL to manufacture methyl isocyanate and the pesticide 7. Knowing very well that a sizable population lives around the periphery of the factory. Local authorities knew nothing about the dangers of MIC. This is how they are starting. When the permission was given, when the license was given, it's well known that there's a lot of population living near the periphery of the country. And the local authorities were not informed about the danger of this manufacturing of this particular pesticide called 7. Without all these things, it starts functioning. In 1979, the unit starts producing MIC without any adequate safety mechanism. The standard. 1979, the production starts. December 1981, the first accident takes place. Due to gas leak, 1 killed and 2 severely injured. This is the first accident. January 1982, again, there is a gas leak. This is a little major one. 25 workers were hospitalized. And following this, 1981, 1982, several other minor gas leak accidents takes place, continuously takes place. Then there is a safety week. And during that safety week, the workers of UCIL, they complained directly to the American management officials about these incidents, about the accidents which is happening continuously, frequently. And then a safety audit was conducted by a team of American engineers. And the American engineers, after conducting the safety audit, they are submitting a report. And the safety audit team noted 61 hazards. Can you imagine? The safety audit, it's coming out with its report, which mentions about 61 hazards, and 11 of which are specifically identified as hazards in the dangerous MIC unit itself. In the MIC units itself, out of 61, 11 are particular to the MIC plant itself. And not only that, the conclusion of the safety audit report is that it warned of a higher potential for a serious incident. Now, based on the report, what everyone expects is that some changes will happen, some safety measures will be taken. Of course, safety measures were taken. Immediately, based on the report, safety measures were taken. But where it was taken in the West Virginia and in the French plant, but not in the Indian plant. Based on the report which was submitted by the safety audit team, whatever they identified as the risk factors in India, no change has taken place in the UCIL, but everything took place in West Virginia and the French plant. So they did all the safety measures there. That's why I call it as the double standards of double corporate standards. And when we talk about all these things, we have to talk about one important person here. He is Bhopali journalist Rajkumar Keshwani. This Bhopali journalist Rajkumar Keshwani, he wrote many articles about the dangers posed by the factory. And you see the articles, the title of the articles. The first article that he wrote about this UCIL is, "Please Save the City." The next one is Bhopal sitting on top of a volcano. If you do not understand this, you will be wiped out. Bhopal on the brink of a disaster. So these are the articles. The topic itself tells the seriousness of the issue waiting. So many articles he wrote. He warned his people and the government that in a case of accident, it will take only 1.5 hours for the death of the entire population, but no one cared about it. He tried his best, writing many articles, talking to the government authorities, creating awareness of the people. Nobody cared, nothing happened. And the workers' union printed hundreds of posters which they distributed throughout the community, warning, beware of fatal accidents. Lives of thousands of workers and citizens in danger because of poisonous gas. Spot of accidents in the factory, safety measures deficient. Nothing changed as UCC purchased the silence of everyone. I use the word UCC purchased the silence of everyone. Journalists tried, the workers tried, they went on protest, they complied to the higher authorities, they printed posters and circulated it among the people to create awareness, but nothing could be done because UCC purchased the silence of everyone. Actually, in this project, UCC made a financial mistake. Now, what is the financial mistake they made? See, the demand for pesticide was not as expected. So they started this unit with an object of making profit, expecting that huge profit will be there. But after they started this plant, they realized that they were not as expected. So what they were planning and transported to another developing country. And till that time, severe cost-cutting exercises were taken. So UGC started this project with the sole object of making profit, and which was not possible because there was no demand as expected. So they decided to move out of the country. They decided to take the plant, dismantle it, and take it to some developing country. Until that time, they decided for cost-cutting exercises. So severe cost-cutting exercises were taken. So between 1983 to 84, just in 1 year, the workforce was cut by half. 50% of the staff were sent away. And the crew of the MIC plant was reduced from 12 workers to 12 to 6. The maintenance crew in the same plant reduced from 6 workers to 2 workers. Safety training is mandatory. Safety training for the operators of the MIC plant is for 6 months, but it was cut down to 15 days. 6 months to 15 days. The training program, the duration was reduced to just 15 days. And in the control room, there was only one operator who was expected to monitor 70 plus panels, indicators and controllers. And many of them often failed, which never worked. So one person monitoring 70 plus monitors, panels and indicators and controller, which is not humanly possible, but he was supposed to do that. And operators who were doing specific jobs were replaced with floating labor. This is another blunder which was committed. The people who were engaged in some specific job, they were sent away because they were protesting, they were asking for their rights. They brought in floating laborers who have nothing to do with these jobs and who did not care because they will come for a day, they will not come for another day. So floating laborers were brought in. Leaky valves and malfunctioning gauges were never replaced. So the highly dangerous plant was operated by men who had little training, cannot read English, but were expected to use English manuals. So this is how the production was, the functioning was going. Now, repeatedly I was using this word MIC, methyl isocyanate. Now, what is the nature of this MIC? MIC is so volatile, it can even react with itself. And UCIL, if you can see in the diagram, UCIL used 3 huge tanks to store 15,000 gallons of liquid MIC. There is, you can see there 3 tanks in the diagram, E610, E611, and E612. And safety regulations prescribed the maximum that one container can store is only 50% of the tank can be used for storage. 50% has to be kept empty. But a much, much higher amount was stored. And another requirement for MIC, storing MIC, is that it had to be kept at 0 degrees Celsius. I said it's a very highly reactive element. It has to be maintained at 0 degrees Celsius. But if you can see there is a refrigeration system shown in the diagram. The refrigeration system was shut down for cost cutting. So first thing, 3 tanks are there. The standard says only 50% of the 50% of the capacity only they can store it, but they were storing much, much higher amount. It has to be kept at 0 degrees. It has to be maintained at 0 degrees. The refrigeration system is there, but not functioning. It was shut down for cost cutting. Now, on the fateful day, on the intervening night between 2nd December and 3rd December, it was around 11 p.m. One of the operators noticed a leak of MIC gas. And he could see that the pressure is increasing in the storage tank E610, the first one in the diagram. So he noticed that. He immediately informed the supervisor that he could sense leakage of MIC. You can spell that. And he also said that he noticed an increase in the pressure. But the supervisor said, we can attend to it after the tea time. Tea time is at 12:15 a.m. After that, we can attend to it. So he was so lethargic. He said that, let it be. Look for some more if there is any other leak. So we can attend to it at 12:15 a.m. And in case of any such leak, there is a safety device called the vent gas scrubber. You can see it in the diagram there, the vent gas scrubber. And what is the function of this vent gas scrubber is that it will neutralize the toxic discharge from the MIC system. If in case of any such accident, if the toxic element comes out of these storage units, there is a safety device there, the vent gas scrubber. It will neutralize it. And that was switched off 3 weeks before the accident. Right? So according to the information given by the workers, the supervisor asked a worker who do not have sufficient training to wash the pipes with water. And washing the pipes with water, this procedure is completely prohibited. This should not be done. As I said, MIC is a very, very highly reactive material and it reacts badly with water. So the pipes should not be washed with water. But on that day, the supervisor has asked a worker and who do not know anything about it, who do not have any training how to wash it. He has done it and it's a huge amount of water which has been used. And the safety, the wall which was separating the MIC and the pipes, that wall was not tightened properly and huge amount of water has entered the MIC storage unit. It triggered vigorous exothermic reaction. And even in that case, in such conditions, if this happens, if by some exothermic, due to some reason, if the exothermic reaction takes place, there is another safety system. So there is another safety mechanism called the gas flare safety system. You can see that the flare tower there. It was not functional for nearly 3 months. So here in the diagram, you can see so many safety devices are there, but nothing was functional. So the flare tower was also not functional. Pressure and heat was building up inside this storage unit E610 at around 1 a.m. December 3. The safety valve gave way and tons of poisonous MIC gas leaked into the air. Nearly approximately 40 tons of MIC gas leaked into the air. In addition to all the safety failures, the safety alarm, the public alarm system was also switched off. It was not working. Actually, they had a siren system. The siren system had actually two systems that were there. One meant for the the plant, and one meant for the public. And often it happened. These accidents were repeating several times. Gas leaks were there, and so they never switch on the alarm for the public, the siren for the public, because unnecessary panic will be created. And so now also, during this time also, they switched off the public alarm system, so the public was not warned about any gas leak. Now, what is the consequence? What happened? Within hours, the streets of Bhopal were littered with human corpses and dead animals. I use the word littered with. Within hours, like 1 o'clock it happened, within hours, the street of Bhopal were littered with human corpses and dead animals. Nearly 3,800 people died immediately, mostly in the poor slum colony adjacent to the UCC plant. Local hospitals were flooded with the injured people crying for help. But the doctors have no idea what has happened, what is the antidote to be given, what is the gas that has leaked, what is the safety procedure for that. Nothing was informed, and the UCC was not giving any information to them, what has to be done. So people were dying in the hospitals. Thousands and thousands of people died. This is, if you can read this, one of the survivor during an interview, he says, an entire settlement was scampering out of their homes. So an entire settlement was scampering out of their homes, running without really knowing where to go or what to do. Many collapsed on the way, some forever. Children vomited blood. Pregnant women stumbled and fell on the ground, crying and bleeding profusely. With the grip of death chasing them, their fear turned into panic. Relatives did not wait to pick up the bodies of those they loved and were alive only moments ago. Children got separated from their parents, husbands from their wives, and brothers from their sisters. In the mad rush to run away from the clouds, many were trampled to death. See, this is one of the survivor who was given an interview about the accident, what has happened on that day. And I'm sure if you read the interview of the survivors, even a person who is very strong will definitely cry. That was the status of the people. Now, after that, what is the next consequence? What happens is that a lot of legal proceedings involving UCC, UCIL started after the disaster. Several criminal cases were filed against the CEO of UCC, Warren Anderson. December 7, 1984, Warren Anderson, who was the CEO of the UCC, he visited the Bhopal factory and was arrested. He was arrested but released on bail of 25,000 rupees on the same day, after promising that he would appear in the Indian court to face the charges against him. 25,000 rupees means it is approximately $500, nothing, peanuts. So he paid the money, he promised that he will come back to the Indian courts and face the charges. He went out of the country, and how he left the country, you know, he was escorted to New Delhi on a special government aircraft and allowed to leave the country. He never returned. Number of cases, so many cases were filed, and due to increasing number of cases, the government of India passed the Bhopal Gas Leak Disaster Act. And why this act was passed is that it gave the central government exclusive rights to represent all victims, whether or not in India, as parents patriae. So since the number of people were affected more, the Indian government took the trustee position that it will represent all the victims and get justice for them. And the consequence of this is that individuals cannot file a case in any court. It is only the government who will represent the victims and get justice for them. And there was a lot of criticism on this, that the government is trying to evade its responsibility. How it was trying to evade its responsibility? The government owned stakes at UCIL. because it is only 50.9% of the shares owned by UCC. The rest was belonging to the Indian government and the Indian people. So by this, due to this, Indian government is also partially liable. But by enacting this legislation, there was criticism that the government is trying to evade its responsibility. But then the central government filed a complaint against UCC before Southern District Court of Newark, USA. And why they decided to go to USA and file a case in USA is that they thought more compensation would be awarded by the American court. And Indian lawyers before the American District Court said that the Indian courts are not capable of handling such issues, and hence they decided to file a case here. Because there was a person called Justice Keenan who questioned, why are you here? Why the case is not filed in the Indian court? The Indian lawyers, what they answered is that they said the Indian courts are not capable of handling such issues. And they said before the American court, Indian legal system is inadequate to handle the Bhopal litigation. Justice Keenan, the court, dismissed the claims on the inconvenience means this is not the correct forum to file the case because the witnesses are available in India, the accident has taken place in India, the evidence is available in India, that should be the correct forum. So he said for the reason of forum non-convenience, he will not accept the jurisdiction, and he said he dismissed the case. And he also said the American courts, which are already extremely attractive to foreign plaintiffs, would become even more attractive. The flow of litigation in the United States would increase and further congest already crowded courts. And he did not stop with this. He also said another thing. He said, if the District Court of America takes a decision in this court, then in future, the history will say the American court did not allow the jurisprudence, the legal jurisprudence in India to develop. So the court, the Indian court has to take up this case, right? In September 1986, the Union of India filed a complaint in a District Court of Bhopal. Now the District Court of Bhopal gave a wonderful, it ordered interim compensation of 3.5 billion rupees. UCC went on appeal. On appeal, Madhya Pradesh High Court reduced to 2.5 billion rupees. They did not pay the amount. They preferred to go on appeal. They appealed to the Supreme Court. When the matter was being heard by the Supreme Court in 1989, UCC and the Government of India reached an out-of-court final settlement of US dollars 470 million, approximately at that period of time, 750 crore rupees, and the amount was paid to the government. And what is the settlement? The amount was paid. What is in exchange? What is the terms? So in exchange, UCC was to be absolved of all civil liabilities. Criminal cases against UCC and its officials were to be withdrawn. I repeat, criminal cases against UCC and its officials were to be withdrawn. The Government of India was to defend the corporation in the event of future suits. There was widespread criticism for quashing the criminal proceedings because criminal proceedings cannot be quashed. You cannot go on a compromise on criminal proceedings. But it has happened. Now, the survivors protested against the settlement. It's very low. If you see, it is less than 15% of what the Government of India asked for initially. And they have settled down for an amount which is only 15% of the demand made. And the survivors challenged it as the number of death and injured were shown wrong. The government was showing it as around approximately only 5,000 people died, but it was much more than that. And the injured people, the number was also not correct because what was shown is that many of them who went to the hospital, they were sent back home on the same day. So it was considered as a temporary injury. But what came to be known in years is that they suffered for generations. Whatever happened, whoever was exposed to the MIC on that day, not only that they suffered, their children and their grandchildren, it was continuing. But so this was all completely wrong. Whatever the figure shown was wrong. So there was a lot of protest. Then in 1991, Supreme Court ruled that the compensation amount will stand the same, but revised the criminal proceedings against 9 Indian accused and 3 foreign accused, including Warren Anderson. Right? Warren Anderson ignored all the summons issued by the Chief Judicial Magistrate of District Court of Bhopal. He did not appear before the court. Court ordered for attachment of properties of UCC in India and extradition of Warren Anderson. So because of the protest of the survivors saying that the number of death and the number of injured is wrong, the compensation given is not adequate, it is just peanuts. And because of this protest and the criminal proceedings cannot be quashed. So in 1991, what happens is that the Supreme Court takes a decision. The decision is that the amount of compensation will be the same, but then the criminal proceedings are reinstated. And due to that, warrant is issued against the CEO of the company, Warren Anderson, and 2 other people, and 7 Indians. Now, summons served, but Warren Anderson did not appear before the Indian court. So, what the court says is that the assets of UCC in India has to be attached, and he has to be extradited to India. The American government refused to extradite Warren Anderson on technical grounds, and he died in 2014 at the age of 92. He lived his life happily. He was never brought before justice. In the meantime, in 2001, Dow Chemical Company purchased Union Carbide Corporation, and it inherited assets and liabilities of Union Carbide, but refused to take any liability for Bhopal disaster. It always distanced itself, saying that it did not happen during our period. We are not concerned about this. And it refused to take any action to clean up the toxic waste in and around the factory site, which continued to pollute the land and water. See, the disaster did not stop with December 3rd, whatever has happened, people died. For continuously for a long period of time, this factory, all the toxic materials were dumped in and around the factory, and that was continuing to pollute the land, and people were suffering because of that as well. And the Dow Chemical Company, which purchased the Union Carbide Corporation, it has to inherit the liabilities as well as if it is inheriting the assets, it has to inherit the liabilities as well. But it clearly said it will not do anything. It has no responsibility for that. Protests continued. Survivors demanded adequate compensation as their suffering did not end. 3 generations have suffered consequences of exposure to MIC, and it is now continuing. So people protested. Now, due to continued protest by the survivors that the number of death and injury presented before the court in 1990s were inaccurate, in 2011, a curative petition was filed by the central government in the Supreme Court of India. And what is the demand? The demand was for additional compensation of rupees 7,413 crore from UCC, which is now owned by the Dow Chemicals. After nearly 9 years, it was to be taken up for hearing by the Supreme Court on 28th January 2020. The Constitution Bench was constituted with Justice Arun Mishra, Justice Indira Banerjee, Vineet Saran, Justice M.R. Shah, and Justice Ravindra Bhatt. But Justice Ravindra Bhatt recused himself from hearing the case. The 5-judge bench headed by Justice Arun Mishra adjourned the hearing and said Chief Justice of India, S.A. Bobde, would take a call on composition of the bench to hear the matter. So, starting from 1986, their struggle is going on, the protest is going on, survivors are fighting for justice, and in 2020, it's still going. According to me, the tragedy is still continuing. The first tragedy happened on the 9th of December 2nd, 1984. The second tragedy is, which is continuing now, is that the children born out of the disaster are suffering from multiple health issues. As I said, the chemical waste for so many years, which has been dumped in and around the premises of the UCIL factory, it is approximately 350 tons of chemical waste. It is still there in the factory and around the factory, which is affecting the underground water, which is affecting the life of the people there, and it is still continuing. They are suffering from that. And the latest one which has added to it is COVID-19. The Bhopal residents who were exposed to MIC gas are suffering from cancer, cardiovascular diseases, and now they are more vulnerable to COVID-19 because their immunity level is very low. So for them, the tragedy is still continuing. Now, after this incident, after this disaster, a lot of changes took place in the legislative framework. As you see, you can see here the number of legislations which were newly enacted or changes, amendments took place. Factories Act 1948 was amended to extend the scope of risk from such industries. The Environment Protection Act was enacted in 1986. The Environment Ministry came up with the Manufacture, Storage and Import of Hazardous Substance Rules in 1989. Public Liability Insurance Act was passed in 1991, which was supposed to provide for immediate and interim relief to disaster victims till their claims of compensation were finally decided. Disaster Management Act 2005. Several other laws, laws were enacted, amended, but then I don't think much has changed. Now, what the judiciary did, what was the response of the judiciary to address this issue? So for that, first we have to discuss about Rylance versus Fletcher. So you all must be knowing this case, Rylance versus Fletcher, where in 1868, a new law of tort was developed by Justice Blackburn, and it is called strict liability. So Rylance and Fletchers were adjoining owners of adjoining lands, and Rylance was having a textiles mill, and he wanted to construct a water reservoir to provide water for his textile mill. And Fletcher was owning a mine, and Rylance engaged some independent contractors to construct a water reservoir for him. And while constructing the water reservoir, the independent contractors, the workers, noticed some old shafts there. Since it was filled with earth, they did not care much about it. They completed the work. After the work was completed and when the water was filled in the water reservoir, due to pressure, the water leaked through those shafts, and actually those shafts were connecting to the mines of Fletcher, and it flooded the Fletcher's land. And when a case was filed for compensation, what Rylance said is that because till that time the rule was that tortious liability can arise only if you have committed some fault. Without any fault on your part, there is no liability. So here, Justice Blackburn came with a new rule, which says that, which is called strict liability. And he says that any person who brings anything on his land, which on escape can cause harm to others, is strictly liable for it. He cannot say that there was no mistake on my part. So there's a new law of tort which evolved in Rylance versus Fletcher called the strict liability. But in case of strict liability, some exceptions or defenses to strict liability was also recognized in the same case. So what are the defenses available? Consent of the complainant, common benefit, act of a stranger, act of God. These are all the exceptions. In these cases, there's no strict liability. So in Bhopal gas leak case, UCC tried to use all the defenses available to delay the judicial process. Now, the Supreme Court of India, after the experience of this Bhopal gas leak case, got an opportunity to change this law, the law of strict liability, to plug in the loopholes in the case of Shriram Fertilizers Oleum gas leak case. So here, immediately after this Bhopal, exactly after 1 year, nearly 1 year after this Bhopal gas leak case, December 1985, oleum gas leaked from the factory of Shriram Fertilizers, which was in the Delhi NCR region, crowded area. One advocate died and many injured. The Supreme Court evolved the new absolute liability rule. From strict liability, it changed the rule to absolute liability. And the court said, the rule of strict liability evolved in 1860s does not suit to the socio-economic conditions of the 20th century. Any hazardous industry, owes an absolute and non-delegable duty towards the community to compensate the victims in the event of harm and cannot invoke or plead any defense saying that it had taken all reasonable care. So this is the absolute liability rule. So India moved from strict liability to absolute liability in case of hazardous industries. So this is the rule now established by the Supreme Court in the case of Shriram Fertilizers case. So the law has changed. Now I'm coming to Visakhapatnam, the Vizag case. On 7th May, around 2:30 to 3 a.m. in the morning, toxic gas called styrene leaked from the storage unit of a plastics manufacturing plant of LG Polymers. It quickly spread over a radius of 3 km to 5 km, affecting nearly 5 nearby villages. After 22 hours, there was another leak from the same plant, and it eventually killed 11 people. I think it has increased to 13 now, and injured thousands of people. So almost very similar to Bhopal. Early morning accident has taken place. People were all sleeping, didn't know what is happening. Preliminary investigations has revealed that the plant was closed due to lockdown for more than a month. Nearly 43 days it was closed. And the accident might have happened due to human error. So when the lockdown was lifted, some unskilled labor mishandled the maintenance work. The chemical styrene was supposed to be stored below 20 degrees Celsius. Below 20 degrees Celsius, it will be in liquid state. If it goes above 20 degrees, it will vaporize, it will become into a gaseous state, and it will spread, and exactly that is what has happened. So it was not stored in the right temperature. When the toxic gas began to spread, the workers ran away. 15-20 workers were there who noticed the leak. They did not caution the people, instead they ran away. No siren to warn the people. The standard safety procedure in case of hazardous industries is that whenever they resume operations after a gap, safety audit has to be conducted. But here it was not done. Without doing any safety audit after the lockdown, they have tried to start the production. And it is very clear that whatever has happened is due to human negligence. And that is why I said in the beginning itself, I don't agree that these are accidents, because accidents means which could not have been prevented by anyone. And in both the cases, Bhopal and Vizag, gas leak cases would have been prevented. They are not accidents, but disasters created by human. So the Vizag, coming to again the Vizag chemical plant, it was established in 1961 as Hindustan Polymers. In 1978, it was merged with McDowell and Company. In 1997, it was acquired by South Korea-based LG Chemicals, which renamed the company to LG Polymers India. See, in 2019, recently, the State Pollution Control Board has given permission to this chemical plant to expand the operation, though it is a highly polluting one, and so close to the residential localities. Nearly 2 lakh people were living in the surrounding. In spite of that, in 2019, the State Pollution Board has given permission to the chemical plant to expand its operation. And this LG Chemical has expanded its operation 5 times between 2006 to 2018. It was continuing to do that. And without any clearance from Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, which is a mandatory requirement. So from 2006 onwards, they were not following the norms. Without clearance, they have been doing this. And in 2019, the State Pollution Control Board has given permission to it without noticing all these things. 7th May, gas leak took place. The High Court of Andhra Pradesh took suo motu cognizance of the incident and directed the state to take all necessary steps to mitigate the loss that may be caused due to this incident. The National Green Tribunal, NGT, it also took suo motu cognizance of the incident, and on May 8, directed the LG Polymers India to deposit an interim penalty of rupees 50 crore to the district magistrate for the damage caused. LG Polymers immediately did that. They deposited the amount. But it challenged the jurisdiction of the NGT before Supreme Court of India. After depositing the amount, they have challenged the jurisdiction of the NGT. Senior advocate Mukul Rohtgi had sought a suspension, appeared on behalf of the LG Polymer, and has sought a suspension of the dispersal of the rupees 50 crore. They deposited it and they are asking for stopping the dispersal of the amount. And day before yesterday, the Supreme Court has stayed all the directions given by the NGT and asked the High Court of Andhra Pradesh to decide the various disputes in connection with this case. Now, next, what will happen? We have to wait and see what are going to be the developments. Whether, again, like the people who suffered under the Bhopal gas leak case, these people will also suffer, or proper actions will be taken. We have to wait and see. I quote MC Mehta here. I don't think we have learned much from the Bhopal disaster so far. Most of the laws are still on paper and their enforcement is poor. What Bhopal and the many accidents that have followed it show us is that we only talk, but the affected persons are not given compensation and no liability is fixed on erring companies. This he has said before this Vizag incident. Because after Bhopal gas leak, several minor Bhopal-like incidents took place. There in pain, MC Mehta is saying this, that we have not learned the lesson at all. Now the conclusion is, nothing much has changed even after 35 years. Big companies continue with their attitude of non-compliance. Government officials turn blind eyes to such companies at the cost of the human beings. It's still continuing, so painful. So I stop with this.
So thank you, ma'am,
yes.
so much.
Yes, Nirmali.
And it was really informative, and the way the slides have been formed, it was something like, it was like a storytelling. You were telling and we were seeing, so it was both. We never once, at least I never felt that you were far away from us. So I have two questions that have come up. So I'll sum up those two questions together and ask you. As you have very well concluded and said that till now the situation has not changed. There hasn't been much development to what we see Bhopal in the 1980s to what we see in 2020, the Vizag case. But the students wants your suggestion that what can be the little change in the regulatory authority, or there can be little change in the legal aspect so that such accidents, if happened in future, can be controlled, or preventive measures can be taken, or punitive action against the owners can be done, as you have well mentioned about absolute liability.
See, that is why in one slide, I listed all the legislative framework, all the legislative changes which has taken place after the Bhopal gas leak case. Yeah. But then I concluded that nothing has changed. It means it is not that we do not have the law. We have the law. I quoted MC Mehta. He also said that we have enough laws, but where we fail is the implementation part. And in every slide, there was something written in bold, and I repeated those sentences. UCC could purchase the silence. What do you mean by purchase the silence? UCC could manage the deviation 1 and the deviation 2. So it is the corruption which is the prevalent one. And without eliminating that, the human lives cannot be saved. There is no depth of law. We have plenty of laws.
Ma'am, if I may just
yes.
just to add on to this, what I mean, as you rightly said, ma'am, yes, there are a lot of legislations, and irrespective of whatever party comes in the power, probably, how to tackle the governmental will. We can still once again come up with couple of other legislations now that this Vizag incident has come up. Government will once again probably try and do it at a local level or at a national level. But when we try and talk about this, how do you think that we are going to tackle with the lack of governmental will to prohibit these kind of incidents to happen in the near past? What is the remedy for that?
Yeah, so I think the responsibility will be on the young law students, like the students who are listening to this lecture. They have to bring in the change. So we cannot go on enacting law after law. See, here if you see, there is no fear at all. The erring companies, the big companies, do not have fear only when they are operating in India. For example, the Dow Chemicals, when they have taken over this UCIL, UCC, they purchased the UCC. In India, they refuse to take the responsibility for cleaning up the chemicals, or they refuse to take any responsibility for whatever UCIL has done. But in America, there was another thing, which was another accident which was created by UCC, something related to asbestos. There they paid all necessary compensation. There they are taking the responsibility, the liability, what UCC left, and they are paying it. But in India, they are challenging it and trying to prolong it, saying that they cannot pay the money. So where we are lacking is that there is no fear. Like if in any accident, if the punishment is given to the failing government officials, you have any statistics to say that the government officials were punished for not doing their executing their responsibilities properly? We do not have any such precedents. Yes, and even the foreign companies, the amount of fear they have in other countries, they do not have in India, because they know that the procedure are lengthy and the punishment is not going to be that severe.
Yeah, ma'am, I think very rightly you said. I would just add two things. One is still in Indian concept. In India, probably we see that the concept of corporate criminal liability is in a very nascent state. We don't have much literature to look into. I, being a corporate law student and learning still, I don't find much literature, any authoritative literature apart from a couple of them, which talks about the corporation's legality or probably the criminal liability of a corporation. And second is, I think, we need to take care of the whistleblowing policy, which needs to be foolproof. I mean, when we were discussing about the governmental will, we know that there are lacunas and it will take a lot of time, and it's a cultural issue for the government to come in with some modifications or something like that. But I think these corporations, at least the government could help us with a strict whistleblowing policy, that whenever, at what level, either vertical or horizontal, whenever there are certain elements which the people, workers or anybody come up with, they can at least report this to the appropriate authority, and then the liability is on the appropriate authority to take certain actions, or at least pull them into the liability punishment sector. So I think, what do you think, that the whistleblowing policy should also be made stricter?
See, whistleblowing, I spoke about the Bhopal journalist. There were whistleblowers. He was blowing the whistle continuously, writing article after article. The workers were blowing the whistle. So many accidents have taken place. Take some accident. Everything was purchased. Silence was purchased. Till that is stopped, nothing is going to help us.
Thank you very much. I mean, it was a lot of good old memories came in front, and and thank you very much for your time. And it was so illustrative, and the students, I'm sure the students are very much enlightened by this discussion which you had, and that. Yeah, over to you, Mrinalini, please.
Ma'am, as sir said, thank you so much for coming here. You said something, storyline. I, being an environmental law student, I learned how to teach today, I can say, in front of my students, because the way you drafted the everything, ma'am, it went like a flow. Not a single moment did I ever felt that I was confused, because you started with the stories, and then you connected with the statutes, and then you went to the present scenario, which is something I really learned.
Thank you, Birnaji, giving me this opportunity.
Oh, as
I said in the beginning of the lecture itself, this affected me so much. What is happening in this country? What is happening around me? And why this is being repeated? And why we are not able to stop it? Several questions came in my mind, and that's the reason I chose this topic.
Is that you were very emotional when you kept on saying the stories, which was very much evident when you said it. And I'm sure the students might have also seen that every moment, every word you said, you connected to it very well. So, which was really, really nice.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. The webinar here.
Thank you.